Right, there seems to be a general consensus when people talk about the worst episode of WCW Monday Night Raw. Most people point to the show that didn't have any wrestling at all for the first hour, and even though I don't agree that it's a bad show, others believe, for some reason, that it doesn't get any worse than this for WCW's flagship television program. What about Monday Night Raw though? See, it gets a bit more tricky when it comes to Raw because there's so many episodes, and on top of that, there's been so many bad episodes. With WWE Raw, there's full-blown eras where the show was just boring, or long periods where there was really no reason to tune in, so it makes it really difficult to select just one show and hail it as the absolute worst of all time. I can, however, tell you right now what I feel is the worst episode of Raw during the Monday Night War time period. A show so bad that apparently it made Vince McMahon put someone else in charge of writing Raw altogether, and a show that made the WWF realise they had to change course very quickly. So today I'm taking a look at the April 14th, 1997 episode of Raw, a show that featured matches from both Johannesburg in South Africa and Muncie, Indiana in the United States. So what's going on here, and why are there matches from two different locations? Well, not all's as it seems. The matches and promos from Muncie, Indiana were taped the week before, while the Johannesburg matches were taped a few days later. On commentary, Vince McMahon tries to put it across like this is some sort of simulcast with matches taking place in chronological order, like the WWF are going from one location to another in real time. But in reality, the show's pretty much a Frankenstein job, taking bits and pieces from two separate events. Yeah, WWF Raw being taped's nothing new, but bullshitting about going back and forth from two different countries in real time is certainly new. You might actually think this sounds pretty unique, and it's maybe a cool way to spice up these taped shows, but just wait until you see the matches they put on. McMahon and Jim Cornette are providing commentary from the States. Cornette was named as the writer of this show, by the way. While over in Johannesburg, we've got Jim Ross and the Honky Tonk Man. Yeah, the Honky Tonk Man. I'll mention here too that there's a lot of commentary issues in this show, with the microphones cutting off from both the US portion and the South Africa portion. It's baffling that these weren't fixed because, you know, it is a tape show after all, but I won't make mention of this issue again. Just something to be aware of if you're watching either the network version or the live version of this particular Raw. Our opening match comes from Muncie, and it's the Godwinns taking on the Legion of Doom. Both teams are babyfaces, and it should be an easy win for Hawk and Animal, right? The Road Warriors only made their WWF return just over a month prior to this show, so they're still pretty hot. We haven't got to the point where they keep losing matches they really should have won, so this should have been a cakewalk for the L.O.D. The match came about because Henry Godwinn threw a bucket of slop all over Hawk and Animal while aiming for Owen Hart and the British Bulldog, so everything's in place for an easy win really. We have got Hawk no-selling a piledriver, we have got Animal and Henry wasting a ton of time, Phineas pulls off a jawbreaker which seems to really stun Road Warrior Animal, and even Hawk looks at him as if to say, "What the hell's wrong with you, man?" We then get treated to Phineas spitting, catching his own saliva and proceeding to wash his own hair, which, yeah, okay, he's supposed to be a filthy pig farmer and this is what pig farmers do. Hawk spits on his hand and he shoves it into Phineas's face. The two then do a little work and Phineas tags out after Hawk telegraphs a backdrop. What follows is some sloppy work between Hawk and Henry, pun fully intended, and we build towards a hot tag as the Godwinns take control. I'll cut to the chase here. Animal gets tagged in, the match breaks down with all four men brawling, and when the opportunity arises, tag team champions Owen and the Bulldog show up to cost L.O.D the match. Davey hits Animal with his tag team belt and the Godwinns win. Now, this match in itself isn't what you'd call good, but it is a stepping stone towards an upcoming L.O.D versus Owen and Bulldog match. You can't knock it too much because it serves a bigger purpose at a future date, so these kind of bookings are sometimes necessary. That being said, the Godwinns really shouldn't be getting wins over Hawk and Animal. The Legion of Doom shouldn't be losing in a Raw opening match, and to top it all off, the action in the ring was painfully mediocre. Absolutely nothing of note happened except for a guy rubbing his own spit in his hair. This is where we're at, ladies and gents. We go over to South Africa for our first international match of the evening. It's the real Double J Jesse James versus Hunter Hearst Helmsley. Two competent wrestlers, no matter what you may think of them, two guys who know their way around the ring thanks to their experience, and two guys who are going to get a good opportunity to show what they can do because they've been given 15 minutes of ring time here, which is quite a lot for mid-card performers. Why then, in the good name of fuck, did they spend the first 3 minutes on wrist locks and hammer locks? I have absolutely no idea. 3 minutes doesn't sound like a terribly long time, but it feels like an absolute lifetime when you're watching two guys do nothing but jockeying for position. And hey, I do like it when performers go through the routine of trying to masterfully gain the advantage through reversals, counters and positioning, but there's definitely an art form to it. William Regal, for example, is a master of this particular craft, and his initial chain wrestling during the opening moments of his matches are just as good, if not better, than the finishes of his matches. What Road Dogg and Triple H do here is a series of wrist locks, hammer locks and arm bars that goes on forever, and it makes me think that the competitors might not have known that these matches were getting taped for Raw. This is some serious house show shit where things are being really dragged out. When the action does pick up ever so slightly with Triple H getting physical in the corner, we go to commercial break, and when we come back it's a suplex, some posing, a knee drop, and a good old fashioned 1 minute chin lock. It's worth mentioning here that over on WCW Nitro, around this same time, Rey Mysterio and Juventud Guerrera were completely blowing people's minds. After hitting his running knee, Triple H applies another chin lock. I jest about chin locks, but I'm trying my best to be serious here. And speaking of being serious, Road Dogg hulks up by dancing a little in the corner. This does seem to help as the match picks up a little from this point on, but what you need to keep in mind here is that we're dealing with a fired up babyface real Double J. This means we get even more dancing during his punch routine. We even get some Elvis style footwork before a clothesline. Yeah, it's not good. In the end, our esteemed commentator, the Honky Tonk Man, distracts Roddy, and this allows Hunter to win with a pedigree. So that's interference in our first two matches for those keeping score. Road Dogg invites Honky Tonk into the ring for a fight. This doesn't happen, of course. So we're left with an incredibly boring match here, and imagine if you switched over to Nitro, you would have been rewarded for checking out the competition. You think it can't get any worse? You're very, very wrong, ladies and gents, because next we've got another match from Johannesburg, and this one is mind-bendingly bad. The Nation of Domination Savio Vega versus Intercontinental Champion Rocky Maivia in a non-title match. The fact that it's a non-title match already lets us know that Savio's gonna win, but that's the least of our worries. Now, I fully expect 99% of my audience to understand the meaning of a rest hold, and for those who don't know what it is, well, it's self-explanatory. Lock in a hold and both competitors get a rest. Rest holds are a necessity. It lets the guys recharge so they can get up again and continue their match to the absolute best of their ability. Savio Vega versus Rocky Maivia in Johannesburg is the longest match on our show tonight. It's a whopping 17.5 minutes. So maybe the boys are going to need more than just one rest hold. That's absolutely fine and it's absolutely expected. But here's where it gets utterly ridiculous. The guys decided not to switch up their rest holds. Instead, we've got Savio Vega performing the same rest hold over and over again. It's one of the dumbest looking holds of all time. It's a nerve pinch, which is basically holding onto your opponent's shoulder like you're congratulating them for a job well done. Guys, we've got 6 of these devastating nerve pinches throughout this entire showdown. Okay, so one of these nerve pinches is locked in during a whole commercial break, so there's no way to accurately time just how long Savio was getting on Rocky's nerves. But from what we saw on TV, roughly 6 minutes of this match is nothing but pure nerve pinch madness, which is absolutely insane. It feels so much longer when you're watching it, and it drags on for an absolute eternity. I'm also not including the 2 arm bars Rocky Maivia applied earlier on, and I'm not including the time Rocky was in a nerve pinch during the commercial break. And the fact that the complete match runtime is 17.5 minutes is just, man, it's one of the most tedious piles of shit I've ever had the pleasure of sitting through. The Nation stand at ringside, but Savio didn't need their help to win. A handful of tights secure Savio the 1-2-3, and it's after the bell when the Nation launch an attack. Half the audience didn't see this because they fell asleep, but they wake up a little when Ahmed Johnson runs down swinging his big 2x4 around. Audiences at home are then reminded that our main event tonight actually features Ahmed taking on Crush, and just let me repeat that. Our main event for this episode of Raw is Ahmed Johnson taking on Crush. The WWF are showing absolutely no mercy on this evening. Every bad show has at least one redeeming quality, or at least you'd hope it would, and that redeeming quality happens next. We go back to the United States for a Steve Austin interview, but keep something in mind here. Austin, the WWF's brightest prospect since his match against Bret Hart at WrestleMania 13 a few weeks ago, is given 2.5 minutes to speak here. Savio Vega got over double that time to put Rocky Maivia in a series of nerve pinches. What are we doing here, folks? Still, it is an interesting time for Stone Cold, and I do enjoy watching his interviews from this era. It's like he still had something to prove, even though he fully understood that good things were on the horizon. Austin gets informed here that he's getting another match against Bret Hart at the upcoming In Your House Revenge of the Taker show. Austin says he can't be held down anymore, and he calls himself the baddest SOB the WWF has to offer. In regards to Bret Hart saying he's been screwed by the WWF and screwed by Vince McMahon, Bret's yet to be screwed by Stone Cold Steve Austin, and that's going to be the absolute worst screwing the Hitman's ever going to receive. Sounds erotic, doesn't it? And Austin wraps it up by saying win, lose or draw, he's gonna beat Bret up at In Your House. Bret can say he's the best there is, the best there was, and the best there ever will be, but Bret's time has come and gone. We will hear from Bret a bit later on, but I've a real bone to pick with that little promo too. We'll get to that in just a moment. First, we're going back to South Africa for the Sultan versus Goldust. We get the entrances, we then go to commercial break, and when we come back, the match is already underway. This isn't a bad thing, honestly. There's no commentary throughout this entire bout, so viewers are left to come up with their own backstory. We get your typical time-wasting tactics here, including the Sultan threatening to walk out of the match, some light brawling around the ringside area, and a good old chinlock around the 2-minute mark. The Sultan did pull off a nice piledriver, so that's a positive, I guess, but the match abruptly ends after Goldust performs a bulldog. Triple H and China hit the ring to launch an attack, so 3 out of our 4 matches have had interference that's affected the outcome of those matches in one way or another. Triple H and China join forces with the Sultan to give Goldust a beatdown, and we see one of the worst spike piledrivers in pro wrestling history. Two weeks before this show, Bret Hart delivered a great promo where he laid out the reasons for his recent heel turn. It was good because no stone was left unturned, and it made fans kinda realise that, hey, Bret maybe has a point here. The week after, we got a pretty historic piece of WWF TV when Bret stopped Owen and Bulldog from fighting each other while also bringing the family together to form a new version of the Hart Foundation. So naturally, fans are eager to hear more from Bret Hart after he turned to the dark side. Along with what Steve Austin was doing on WWF TV, Bret Hart's recent turn was some of the most compelling stuff the company was producing at the time. So, on this glorious episode of Raw, we don't get a straightforward Bret Hart promo that expands upon the formation of the Hart Foundation. Instead, it's a crappy backstage video that looks like it was shot on a handheld camcorder, and this is spliced with an in-ring promo which also has terrible video quality. I mean, why not just show one or the other, and why edit everything down? Was it really that important to give Savio Vega versus Rocky Maivia 17.5 minutes? Bret says the fans in South Africa are cool, the fans in America suck. He called Shawn Michaels a liar, and he wonders why people look up to a dirty stinking hyena like Stone Cold Steve Austin. Bret says Austin's not good enough, he's not as tough as the excellence of execution, and Bret's gonna, and I quote, stomp a stump of approval on his butt. Again, this was taped, this was edited, why did they include such bollocks when it was easy to take out? Back to Indiana we go for the Headbangers versus Vader and Mankind. Vader and Mankind have a turbulent relationship with their glue being manager Paul Bearer, and I'll be honest here, this isn't a completely downright terrible match. As a matter of fact, it's probably the best match on the show, but that's seriously not saying a whole lot. Again, it's mediocre, it's as average as they come, nothing special happens and you'll forget about it 2 minutes after watching it, but that's where we're at with this episode of Raw, folks. An absolute run-of-the-mill tag team match serves as the measuring stick. The finish was terrible though. Headbanger Mosh takes a swig of something underneath the ring and he spits an unidentifiable liquid in Mankind's face. The referee thought this was out of order and he called for the bell, so we've got ourselves a disqualification. Like, it would have really hurt the Headbangers to take a loss here. Seeing as Mankind's been blinded, he ends up putting Vader in the mandible claw. This is, by far, way more interesting than the match itself. Paul Bear has to pull Mankind away and Foley gets scolded before we go back to Johannesburg, and the international fans get treated to The Undertaker, the Undertaker's voice playing in the stadium and not the actual Undertaker showing up. It's funny too because Undertaker was actually in South Africa for this tour. He is the WWF champion, but he decided not to appear in Johannesburg. So fans who brought their Undertaker signs and purchased Undertaker foam fingers only got to hear the dead man's sweet delicate voice. Before the main event, the Commandant cut a promo. He said the greatest warrior nation ever to come out of Africa were going to take over the WWF very soon. And yeah, this isn't exactly what happened, was it? The Truth Commission was another lower mid-card faction that the WWF really didn't need. The company would soon end up seriously bloated with mid-card factions. The Commandant lays out the Truth Commission goal, and that is to show liberals both in Africa and in the United States the error in their ways. And if the Commission have to beat the truth into people, then they'll be happy to do so. Yeah mate, okay. Main event time, and God bless anyone who sat through this entire show. You're nothing short of amazing and I love you very much. Ahmed Johnson versus Crush, and Ahmed grabs a large post-it note from the audience that says Ahmed Johnson should be the IC champion. Poor blue chipper Rocky Maivia must have felt awful reading this, but he's probably still dealing with extreme nerve damage. Crush comes out with his Nation of Domination teammates. JR says Ahmed's in a very bad situation right here, and so's everyone watching Raw right now. We begin with Crush trying to knock Big Ahmed down, but he's unable to do so, but both go down when they collide into each other. More time wasting follows when Farouk bestows some words of wisdom on Crush. Ahmed goes out, which forces Crush to get back in. Ahmed gets back in the ring by flipping over Crush in what JR calls a very athletic move. And Crush acts like his opponent just disappeared. He just vanished after jumping over his back. It's fucking amazing. Ahmed then performs a pump kick, or at least he tried his best, and this results in more stalling on the outside, more time wasting, and just for the record, if you switched over to Nitro right now, you'd get to see Lex Luger versus Kevin Nash. I know it's not Ricky Steamboat versus Ric Flair, but it might as well have been compared to Ahmed Johnson versus Crush. Ahmed falls out of the ring and D'Lo gets in a few cheap shots. Thank God for D'Lo. Crush brings the big Johnson back into the ring with a suplex. We then get 3 leg drops from Crush as Savio Vega shows up a little late, but better late than never. And when we come back from break, guess what move Crush applies to his opponent? Go, guess. Yeah, it's a fucking nerve pinch. At this point I think we're being trolled, ladies and gents. I think someone's having a laugh. Ahmed fights out, he puts Crush down with a scissors kick that I'm sure Booker T was really jealous of. He then body slams Crush, and afterwards he stands there wondering what the hell he's doing with his life. Like, why is he here? Why is he fighting this guy? Why has he got like 7 knee pads on, and why are his elbow pads protecting his biceps? He then goes for an elbow drop that Crush was supposed to dodge, but instead he gets Ahmed's ass right on his head. So Johnson takes a pile driver, and it's time for a 1.5-minute sleeper hold. Farouk passes Crush's belt, the belt gets wrapped around Ahmed's neck. This leads to Crush to plan another sleeper hold, and thank God Crush signals for the finish afterwards. I don't know how much more of this I can take. Ahmed gets set up for the hard punch, he counters it with a heel kick, and our match ends with Johnson countering a kitchen sink and he gets the 1, 2, 3. Dreadful, absolutely dreadful. After the bell, Farouk says he doesn't care if it's in South Africa, North Africa, Timbuktu. It doesn't matter because the nation's going to get Ahmed sooner or later. Farouk challenges Ahmed to a gauntlet match. Ahmed looks like he's having some issues following what Farouk's saying. Farouk will disband the nation if Ahmed can run the gauntlet, and that's where our show ends. The gauntlet match didn't actually happen at Revenge of the Taker, by the way. It happened a cold day in hell. And it'll be a cold day in hell before I put myself through this utter bollocks ever again, because man, this show sucked. Vince Russo, who was at the time serving as the editor for WWF magazines, said that this was the very show that made the WWF totally switch direction when it came to Monday Night Raw. Here's what Russo said in his book, Forgiven. Someone, I'm not sure who, came up with the great idea of simulcasting Monday Night Raw from overseas and playing it in conjunction with a Monday Night Raw shot in the States. In other words, some kind of trans-global cluster, which it was, mostly due to the bad writing of not just one show, but 2. I'll never forget it. There were 2 different broadcast teams and we would go back and forth, country to country, bringing you non-stop action from around the globe. What a mess. The worst show I'd ever seen in my life. Man, to put it as nicely as I can, the show was horrible. I went to bed sick to my stomach. Remember, I had to go back to work for these guys in the morning. The minute I walked into my office, the phone rang. It was Beth Zaza, Vince McMahon's assistant. Vince wants to see you in his office immediately. I hung up the phone thinking, what did I do now? A meeting with the boss first thing in the morning? This must be bad. Immediately, I took the elevator up to the 4th floor and went to Vince's office. Upon entering, Beth said to me, "They're in there," and pointed to Vince's conference room. They? I thought. What, does he have human resources in there waiting for me? He can't fire me man to man? So I walk into the conference room. To my surprise, there were no representatives from Human Resources to be found, but rather all of Vince's minions sitting around a long table. There was Ross, Pritchard, Cornette, Shane, Kevin Dunn, maybe even a few others, but I don't recall. At the head of the table, there's Vince. He's standing, he looks mad, and he's got the Raw magazine in his hands. The same magazine that housed the Bret Hart shoot interview that triggered the boss to clear his desk of all knickknacks only months earlier. The thought going through my head, I'm done. He's mad about last night's mess and he's going to make an example out of me. I didn't write the show, Pritchard and Cornette did. It's their heads you want, not mine. Vince slams the magazine down on the table. "This is what Raw needs to be like," Vince screamed. Come again? Last night's show was a joke. Raw needs to be like this magazine. I wanted to laugh and cry at the same time. First, the laughter part. So much for politics. With one statement, I rose above all the creative brass sitting in that room. With one statement, Vince finally decided the days of mediocrity were over and it was time to shake things up. With one statement, Vince said, "You're out, he's in." The crying part, this was a dream. Never had I expected things to wash out like this, in such a public display. Vince couldn't have stuck it to them any better. I had won. I had freaking won. All I wanted was a chance, and here it was. Man, I looked in the eyes of Pritchard, Ross and Cornette that day, and never had I saw such hatred. Boasting and bragging aside, what Vince Russo said here was true. This story has been told by others in the room that day, and Vince indeed blew a gasket over this particular episode of Raw. It really is an embarrassment of a show, especially when you remember that WCW Nitro was only a click away. Things would improve for the WWF as the year went on. You can like Vince Russo or hate him. You can use the old Vince McMahon was Russo's filter argument. But the WWF did improve during 1997, and this dreadful show in April was the catalyst for that change. That's how downright putrid it was. But I want to hear your thoughts on this subject, and I want you to let me know what you think is the worst episode of Raw ever produced by the WWE. As mentioned, there doesn't seem to be a consensus on this, and it's not like we all need to agree on the subject, but I'd like to know what you personally think, and it is a subject I can come back to one day. For me, this one sticks out because of reliving the war. It's a real mess of a show, and it really paints the WWF in a bad light. It's no wonder people were switching over to WCW during this time period, and if for some reason you decide to go off and watch this show that I've covered today, then consider this your fair warning. Thank you very much for watching another episode of Atrocity. I hope you enjoyed it because I sure as hell didn't. Have a great day, folks, and please take care.